And okay, this time we'll go for Smith-Morra again, but we played c3 last time. We'll go back to our Smith-Morra. If our opponent decides to decline with the move knight to f6, then I will go back into the c3 Sicilian, but unless they choose to decline it, we'll stick with this. So they've declined it with the move pawn to d5. I don't think this is the best way to decline it. I think knight f6 is a lot better. This variation, as far as I know, is slightly worse for black. Yeah, especially after the move knight f6, I can just play the move knight to c3 and then chase this queen away. As black, you usually want to play the move bishop to b4 to pin this piece. Now I can just develop my knight here and transpose back. I think we're transposing back into some sort of isolated queen's pawn position. Okay, well let's go for an isolated queen's pawn position. After the move e6, we'll transpose back into this position, but I think it's a much better version from the c3 Sicilian one I showed you in the previous game, because the bishop is not on e3, so it can immediately come out to g5. So in these isolated queen's pawn positions, general setup you should go for bishop goes to d3, where it will face towards the king side, which is very useful later on, trust me. And from then on, white will castle the king, and then this bishop will most likely come out to g4, so to g5. And from there we will look at a couple of different plans for white. Generally all centered around attacking the black king side. We also want to keep piece trades to a minimum if we can as white. So after bishop to b4, we can just castle. It might have been tempting there to play queen a4 check, but black had to move knight to c6. Okay, now what do we do now is we bring this bishop to g5. So this is a very annoying move for black to deal with. We're not worried about the move bishop takes c3 because we can always recapture back with the pawn. So that's perfectly fine. Now, after you've developed all your pieces, for the rest of your pieces, usually this rook will end up on c1. This rook will go to e1. And then what I usually do is set up a sort of queen and bishop battery on the king side. So I'll drop my bishop back to say c2 or sometimes even b1, which is why I suggested rook to c1. And then you can follow up with say queen to d3 afterwards. So it's just a question here of whether you want to go bishop here or bring the bishop back to b1. Okay, so here I'll just go bishop c2. So we'll see that this bishop is actually useful later on to bring it back to this diagonal as well sometimes. Also knight e5 is a really handy move in a lot of positions. At the moment though, I don't want to trade queens, so that's why I'm delaying the move knight to e5. Okay, so queen to d3, we have some vague threats on the h7 pawn. Not really at the moment, because it's well defended by the knight, but in the future, maybe. Okay, we'll move this rook, most likely to. It's going to go to e1. I really want to play knight e5, but I probably won't play this move until he moves the queen. If he moves the queen somewhere like c7, I can play rook e1, knight e5, and then start putting pressure on these knights, and in turn it's putting pressure on h7. What we're trying to do here with white is force black to make some concessions by pushing one of his kingside pawns, creating some holes, and once he does this, then we can start trying to utilize some of these weaknesses. So there's no reason here to take the knight. We should just maintain the pin for as long as we possibly can. So always keep the tension. If you don't have to release it, then just keep it. I do want to maybe get rid of this bishop at some point though. So a3 is definitely on the cards here. I'm also waiting for him to move his queen to unpin actually. Once he unpins with the queen, then knight e5 becomes a whole lot stronger, I would say. But he's actually not moving. He's not moving this piece. So I probably also should be waiting. The only thing with rook e1 is that I don't really want to walk into this pin. Can I play a3 here? Might be able to play a3 just to get rid of this bishop. Or maybe I just go rook e1, rook c1. This is also possible. I walk into this pin, which I don't really like, but black can't really take advantage of it at the moment either. Rook e8's a good move. I mean, my opponent's playing very, very calm moves. So normally I play rook c1 here, but because he's not moving the queen at all, I'm actually going to play rook to d1. And at some point I might be hinting at some sort of, lining up of pieces on this diagonal. Okay, so he did move his knight. So as soon as he moves his knight and I get this e5 square, I'm just going to play knight to e5. So this is what I've been waiting for. I also have bishop a4 in some of these positions as well, because he's sort of blocked the rook. Doesn't actually have too many squares for the rook to go to. So all of a sudden after this knight f8 move, the knight comes to e5, and I essentially get my ideal setup of pieces. So this is what you want to do. You get your bishop here, you want to get your knight to e5, centralize your rooks on one of these squares, get the queen and bishop battery. If captures, you pretty much can always recapture with the pawn. It should never really be an issue. So my opponent's idea is clearly he wants to checkmate me on this square, and also he's hitting the pawn on a2. I'm not too concerned about the pawn on a2 because the knight is hanging for one, and not to mention it's incredibly dangerous to take this pawn. So I will play the move pawn to f3. I could also have played the move queen to h3 actually. That was probably another good option. But I want to keep my queen on this diagonal. I also want to keep my queen protecting this bishop. But yeah, the queen on h3 is also very, very strong. Now the question is whether he wants to take this pawn, which is potentially poison. I didn't actually plan for it, but yeah, it sort of worked out. He's gone for g5. Well, g5 does give me time to play c4, so counter move for the queen. I think c4 is a good move as well. So c4, queen a5. I'm not going to even calculate that, but if he does take the pawn, most likely the queen's going to get trapped, like rook a1, rook b1. But yeah, taking that pawn just doesn't look right. So the question is, do I throw in c4 and then move my bishop, or do I just move my bishop right away? Well, if I move my bishop, he takes the pawn. Can I try to trap the queen this way? Possibly. It's possible. I'm just gonna go c4 because it seems a lot simpler. So just counterattacking, the queen comes here. It's most likely, now that black cannot take the pawn, it should be worse because now it just has an open king side. I'm looking at some ideas where I don't actually move the bishop as well. Let's say after queen moves, I play queen e3, threatening some sort of sacrifice on g5. And if black takes my bishop, maybe I go queen takes h6 and get some counterplay that way. But black has made this position very double-edged with this move pawn to g5. Also weakened the position quite a bit. Play the move bishop to g3. I'm going to get hit almost definitely with the move knight to h5 to chase after this bishop. Now, what do? I drop the bishop back to f2 if I want to, but most likely knight h5 is coming anyway, and then the knight's probably going to sit on f4, which is an extremely annoying square to have to deal with. How do we meet this? So I could go bishop f2, knight h5, and then play the move pawn to g3. It does weaken my position quite a bit, but I can always block everything up with the move pawn to d5. So we've changed the position a little bit, by the way. So we no longer have the isolated pawns. Instead, we have these sort of hanging pawns. So what I'm really looking for here is to get a passed pawn at some point as quick as I possibly can. I go bishop to g3 just to stop knight f4. Now if the knight goes to h5, I have ideas of bishop a4 hitting this rook as well. But my goal here is I want to push this pawn up the board. So this passed pawn is going to be what wins me the game. Okay, so bishop a4 looks good. Knight g4 also looks very good here as well. So what happens after knight to g4? It's very difficult to defend this pawn. I'll go knight to g4. You can get king g7, but then maybe I have some ideas with bishop check or even d5. So pushing this pawn is the main priority, as I mentioned, because that's how passed pawn in this position. So I want to go d5 takes and some queen d4 check. Centralize the queen. Have some bishop e5 coming as well. So black captures, maybe we can take the rooks first and then throw in some check and then take the pawn. And then just protect that pawn all the way up the board. That should be the plan. It's very hard to stop as well because black has all these weakened dark squares. Just be very, very careful here. I'm tempted to give this check now. Do I have any other tactics? Actually, I could give this check, because this check I open up my rook on the queen. So now if I give this check, black does something, then I can actually take this pawn and open up a discovered attack. That's quite handy. I probably have other moves as well, but this is the simplest. And when you're playing these sort of faster time control games, or you're running low on time, there's no use pondering on different options, which are all of them are most likely good for you. Just pick one and don't waste too much time. So now the queen's being attacked, this rook will enter into the game on d7. So okay, our opponent resigns. So it's a good isolated queen's pawn game. Let's have a quick look at this. Okay, so Smith-Borra Gambit declined. We end up into an isolated queen's pawn position, bishop to b4, bishop to g5, knight d7. So our opponent was playing very, very well. So here our opponent's been playing excellent moves. I think he should have just played the move bishop to e7 here, dropping the bishop back, getting ready to play knight to d5 at some point. Although it's much trickier now that I already have the bishop and queen battery ready on this diagonal. It's going to take him much longer. Maybe he has to do the same maneuver again, but yeah, I can see that it's a lot trickier than a normal isolated queen's pawn. Something's gone slightly wrong. Maybe h6 was a mistake. Maybe he should have played something like this, bishop e7, then played g6 perhaps. This might have been a better version. But after h6, get this position. As soon as the knight moves away, then I can hold my knight into e5 square, and white is very, very happy here. Bishop a4 coming. I have ideas like queen g3, queen h3. I have knight g4 attacking this knight. So I have a lot of different ideas here to attack. Giving up this bishop, even though it looks like black can win potentially a pawn here, you don't really want to do something like this because it's such a strong piece for black, and if you give up this strong bishop, then now you have to constantly deal with all these dark square problems. So I don't think you should get tempted in these sort of ideas where you go for a pawn on the queen side, especially if you're giving up such an important piece, because in the game we see that black had a lot of problems centered around the dark squares, which wouldn't have happened if he kept the bishop for a bit longer. So I hope you guys enjoyed this game. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all on the next video. Take care.